I'm excited. Thank you so much.
All right.
No, we could really use some intro music right now, if you're willing.
Yeah, let's do a little intro.
Do it.
A little bog skags.
You're muted, Noam.
And if you think that things are not working and you want to keep going on, just wait 1 minute. Yeah, yeah. Oh, here we are getting together again. It's the last night, but don't be sad. There'll be more. Who knows when, but we know why. Ooh, let's get together. It's all of us, with the rest of the world, healing, repairing, holding community for the able and the otherwise. Able differently, and I am not familiar with all the jargon, but I welcome this discussion tonight. Welcome, everyone. Woo-hoo-hoo. Yeah.
Appreciate it. We are officially live on Facebook. We have Larry Rothstein here, Artemis Joukowsky, Noam Sender, and soon another special guest, David. Individuals who are doing big things, and I'd love it if you all just introduce yourself, why you're here tonight, and then we'll dive into At Work, which is a new TV series that will be airing on Bloomberg TV to highlight differently abled individuals in the workforce, workplace, in our communities. So, without further ado.
All right, we have Rhonda. Rhonda is coming in.
Rhonda?
Rhonda.
Rhoda, you mean?
Rhonda
Rhoda.
Rhonda
No,
Bernard. Hello,
No,
Rhonda.
Rhoda.
Rhoda Bernard.
There you
Hello,
go.
Rhoda.
You're
Welcome.
very dark.
You're muted.
I need to get some more light in my room where I
Oh,
am.
there you are. Hello.
Hello.
What an honor to have you here.
It's good to be here. See, the rest of my house is lit up, but not the room I want to be in.
There you go.
Well,
Now we are live and we are also recording. So even though we don't have our big audience yet, we will have more people. I just want everyone to be aware that everything you're doing now, including moving around, and I'll even do some wheelchair dancing for you. Woo! Everything we're doing tonight will be recorded. So this is an opportunity to create a record of the work we're all doing. And Rhoda, what you've done is so remarkable. And can't wait to hear about it in this context.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. So Larry, do you want to begin and just introduce a few thoughts about
yeah, there was an agenda I saw. I don't know if I was going to be introduced after several items were discussed, so I don't know who was leading that.
Don't worry, you just go. You just
okay.
And
so,
then, there'll be people coming in. So as people come in, we'll have to probably adjust our presentation a little bit to include everyone.
Okay. So I'm Larry Rothstein. I'm the co-founder with Artemis Joukowsky of No Limits Media and its executive director. And Artemis and I have been trudging through towards this show, Inclusion at Work, for many years. With the intention that we wanted to show the abilities and value of people with disabilities or differently abled people as a way of reacting to this sort of onslaught of images that come from mainstream media, or as Donald Trump would say, lamestream media. And it's unfortunate, but they tend to fall into two camps. One is inspiration and one is pity. And it seems the narrative is almost unbroken. And I particularly watch CBS News, so I see it every Friday night, almost every Friday night, where Steve Hartman's on the road and he finds an armless boy shooting basketballs, or a autistic girl who mistakes a woman in a bridal gown for Cinderella, and then the woman comes to her house. And the more recent one was the SpaghettiOs incident, in which this autistic young girl loves SpaghettiOs, and because of the COVID crisis, her mother wasn't able to buy SpaghettiOs for her. And then when she posted on, I believe, Facebook, lo and behold, cans of SpaghettiOs came from all around the country to help the little girl, which of course is very nice, except if you think about eating SpaghettiOs on a regular basis, I don't know how good that is. But I was not a fan of them. That's all I can say. But that's the kind of story you see, particularly to end the weekend on a high note, and for Norah O'Donnell to have her eyes glisten with the kindness of the strangers. But unfortunately, they never cover other stories about disabilities, legislation, or unemployment, or violence against people with disabilities. And it's so relentless that if you watch the news on a continuous basis, you just say, oh my God, why is this? And the answer is, in large part, what's known as structural ableism, which parallels structural racism. It's just embedded in our institutions, and we see it more dramatically in the media. But it's there in housing, it's there in governmental policy, it's there in business hirings, it's there in physical space within cities. I mean, it's sort of there everywhere. And it's not necessarily unkindness or overt prejudice. It's just a lack of awareness and consciousness among able-bodied people. I was about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, before the pandemic started, in Copley Place. And I guess it's Vineyard Vines has a store. And outside of the store, they have this gigantic screen. And on the screen, you see the Vineyard Vine kind of people. They're running on the beach, and they're throwing frisbees, and they're sailing. And as I was watching it, a man in a wheelchair, wheeled up, took a look at this wonderful world. And then, of course, he was no part of this world. Apparently, he couldn't buy one of their shirts, and just wheeled away. So it's that kind of ubiquitous advertising, dramatic series. Even when there are characters with disabilities, they're most likely to be played by an able-bodied actor, such as the star of The Good Doctor is an English actor, or the character on Mom, who's in a wheelchair, but he's also able-bodied. So you have, even when there's characters, they're usually not portrayed by people with disabilities. And this extends to local news. They love to cover, weekend runs and walks and rides. And until recently, that involved Tom Brady. They would be there with a camera and a reporter interviewing people. And it extends also to political coverage. On CNN, for example, you'll see 9 people commenting. And now, because of diversity efforts, you have women and African Americans, transgendered people, and gay people, but you never see a commentator who has a disability. You just don't see it. And this extends, I'll go through this quickly, it extends to the entire reality television world, in particular game shows, which I realized very recently that I've been watching Family Feud for maybe 30 years. And I'd never seen somebody with a disability. Apparently, they're not part of families, until one day I saw a little promo, and there was a person in a wheelchair, and I went on YouTube to see the clip, and it was a blind young man who was in a wheelchair. And he was very extroverted, and he was funny. And that's it. I don't know, 6,000 shows, one person. And since 20% of the American population is involved with disability, I guess there are no families they can find that actually has somebody with a disability. And this goes on even into public television. Not only do I not know of any PBS show that stars or is produced by somebody with a disability, the children's programming, other than the Big Red Dog and Sesame Street, which after 50 years introduced one character with autism, there's no program for kids with disabilities to watch. They don't see themselves, although they do see young people who are, again, African American and women and Native Americans, and that has happened, but people with disabilities haven't made the programming list so far. So that's the idea behind inclusion at work. It's sort of simple-minded. People with disabilities need jobs. And by and large, they don't have a lot of jobs. Discrimination is very high. If you talk to any parent who has a child with a disability, they'll all tell you the same thing. Our greatest worry is what's going to happen to this child when we're not around. And so we've managed to put together a 4-part series. We bought the time on Bloomberg because even though I hear it every day when I watch Bloomberg, 2,700 analysts and reporters, my bet is that there's not one that has disability, at least not one that's visible. So we're not going to get Bloomberg to do the show, but we have gotten tremendous support from a gentleman in London named Martin Henlin, who does the weekend programming. And Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, December 5th, we're going to air the first show, and there'll be 3 more after that. And we've managed to get Senator Tammy Duckworth for the first series, and Tim Shriver, the CEO of the Special Olympics, and David Renaud, who is one of the writers of The Good Doctor. He's actually a physician and is paralyzed, along with several executives from Intuit and Penn Mutual. And it's geared to help people, particularly those who hire people, understand some of the issues and some of the companies that are very progressive, such as Intuit, and also to understand some of the other issues that are involved with hiring people with disabilities.
This is a show that will attempt to reach out to human resources directors, HR directors in companies. Bloomberg is a station that's very focused on the needs of managers and business leaders. Yep. And so Saturdays on the Bloomberg calendar is the HR day. And so that's kind of the slot we're in. Is the first date December 5th, Larry?
December 5th. Yeah, it's a Saturday at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. So that's really, we should put that in the chat too, because that is what we really want to drive viewers to. Welcome, Andy. Welcome, Brenda. You're muted.
Hi, Artemis.
So Larry has just given a beautiful introduction to what we're doing at No Limits Media.
We've been listening.
A little clip, but let's not try to do that again. Larry, I'd like you to introduce Rhoda. Is Rhoda on the show?
I don't see her at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, there you are. Will you introduce Rhoda? And then Rhoda, I'd love you to speak a little bit about your program at the Berklee School of Music, because I don't think most people have ever heard of what you're doing there. And it's one of the most remarkable divisions of Berklee School of Music that you run and you are the leader of.
Yeah, I don't see Rhoda, but Rhoda Bernard is the head of the Berkeley's Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs. It's a fantastic program. As I said, the music for inclusion at work will be performed and actually composed by a 10-year-old boy with autism with the help of his teacher. And they do remarkable work. We're official partners with the Institute. It reaches out to teachers, art teachers all around the country, and teachers involved in special education. So she's having a tremendous impact on our society and our schools. And in the midst of this pandemic, she has been gallant and creating an assembly somehow through Zoom and continuing all the work of the Institute, despite they're not really meeting, I guess, physically very much anymore. It's all being done through electronics. So Again, I don't see Rhoda, but if you do, just.
Just
Larry,
make
I'm
sure.
right
Oh, there
here.
you are. Okay. Hi. Hi.
So thank you, Larry, and thank you, Artemis. My name is Rhoda Bernard, and I'm the managing director of the Berklee Institute for Arts Education at Special Needs at Berklee College of Music. We have three main areas of what we do. We provide, and our mission is really to increase access to the arts and arts education for all people. And we focus on for people with disabilities. So the first thing that we do is we do direct service. We provide arts education programs for people with disabilities ages 3 to 93. We serve over 250 students and families every Saturday on our campus when we are in person. We have been fully remote since mid-March, and we will be fully remote through May at least. We don't know yet after that. But these folks take, we have 8 different music programs, 2 adaptive dance programs, and a theater program. And so we have people studying music and dance and theater in all different ways. And the student that Larry mentioned, who Rafael da Costa, who composed the music that's being featured in Inclusion in Work, and has also composed some music for other shows that Nadine Vogel is involved in, is a 10-year-old boy on the autism spectrum who's a pianist and a composer. He is over the moon excited about his music being included in these TV shows. He's having a blast. So, but we have all different kinds of study of the arts. The second thing that we do is we have the only Master of Music and Music Education with a concentration in music and autism in the world, and the only graduate certificate in music education and autism in the world. Although we serve all different disability populations in our direct service, our academic focus is on autism. And these programs train pre-service and in-service arts educators to better reach every student. And they're really groundbreaking. And the students we get in those programs, the students and the alums from those programs do the teaching. I have a 27-member teaching staff in our direct service. And then the third thing we do is lots of professional development for educators, including conferences. We do an annual conference, which this year was online, and it will be online next year as well. We do workshops and mini courses, and I go out and give keynote presentations and do workshops with teachers. And we have an online resource center. We're really trying to provide resources and support for educators who get very little training or support in working with anything other than a typical population. And this is an institute at Berklee College of Music. So we are like a separate nonprofit under the big Berklee umbrella. So except for my salary, I have to raise all the money of our budget. Lots of fun. But I get support from some of the other offices at Berklee. I do have institutional advancement support. So I have help with the fundraising. I do have event support. I do have marketing support, which is great. But all of my staff, I have to raise the money to pay them, materials. Yes, I have marketing support, but I have to pay them. So all of that. So it's a fun enterprise. It builds on work that started more than 10 years ago at Boston Conservatory. And we created the Institute as part of the merger between Boston Conservatory and Berklee, which became legal in 2016. So I'll put my contact info and I'll put the website also in the chat. So this is
Rhoda, I would love for you to say more about how you made this commitment. Like, what happened to you where you felt I have to serve this community? Like, what was your falling in love moment?
Oh man. So I want to make a long story short. Larry's heard this story. I come to this work in a different way from many other people. I think a lot of other people come to this work from their own experience of disability or from knowing someone with a disability well. My angle now I have many experiences with people who I know well, but my entree into this work came from the perspective of access. So I grew up in Randolph, Massachusetts, went through the public school system there. And the year I was walking into high school as a freshman was the year that Proposition 2.5 went into effect. So that at the time, my high school had a fabulous music and drama program, and I was really excited to be a part of it. And it was all eliminated because of Prop 2.5. So was my bus, by the way, and I lived over 2 miles from the school. So as a result, the chorus teacher that we had all had through middle school called a meeting at the Papagenos across the street from the high school, the first week of school, for all of us who had been in chorus. And she said, look, this is the deal. This part of my job has been eliminated. I'm not allowed to go in the building, but I don't want to stop your arts education. So we had auditions in a community center, and one of the choruses met in a church, and all of this was out of school time, and she refused to let us pay her. And I was lucky I made show choir my freshman year, and my parents' basement was big, and it had a piano, and we rehearsed there twice a week. So I saw what happens when arts education is eliminated and people don't have access to it. And it really got me thinking about, my parents took me to everything on the South Shore, but in Boston, in New York, it was a regular event for us to go to a gallery opening, to go to plays, to go to musicals, to go to dance performances, symphony concerts, and to understand that there are so many people for whom those experiences are not possible really upsets me. And then to see what happens when people don't have access to the education really upsets me. And that got me into my work. Since then, of course, now I have many, many amazing people in my life, hundreds of them, with a wide range of disabilities who are incredible artists at all different levels, and folks that I really admire. But my entree into the work came really largely due to that experience and to Charlotte Brown, my then music teacher. She and I are still in touch, and she's now retired, has taken up a career in ballroom dancing, and she's phenomenal. And we've stayed in touch, and she's pretty amazing. So I owe a lot to her.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
So I want everyone now to introduce yourselves and talk in your introduction, talk about being differently abled and what disability means to you in your own life. And with that spirit, I'll introduce Noam, our music director. And I want you two to connect, because I think Noam would be very interesting to work with some kids with autism in particular. But Noam, would you share a little of your story about differently abled and disability?
Sure. First of all, Rhoda, I'm inspired by your words. They speak right to my heart. And I'm so happy that you're doing the work you're doing. I happen to know many individuals that are differently abled, but are incredibly talented. My particular disability, I don't know if it has to do with like learning to read Hebrew and English at the same time, but I'm a little perhaps dyslexic, and reading is difficult for me. Although I love to consume information from books, so I have to work extra hard for that. And the way that I come to see myself as no different than anybody else. And Larry, your introduction about how few, like after 6,000 shows, one person, and others are so much represented. I think that will make a big difference, because there is like hidden gems and buried treasures that haven't been discovered because of some sort of social fright of facing, what could happen, and not allowing that to be part of our daily discourse. I mean, I don't know. My recent involvement has been through the Rudderman Synagogue Inclusion Project. I'm sure you've heard of it, in the Rudderman family. But I don't know where they fit in all this. So the the way that I like, if I can do anything to help with what your effort is, and then I've studied in Berkeley, I have friends and professors, friends in Berkeley, and I am a good communicator and a good listener. I am, I'm here. Yeah, yeah, I'm here, and I'm willing to be a part of what you're doing. And it sounds amazing. And I can't believe this last 12 days of what Artemis with Sid and Patrick, he's resting tonight, I think, have brought to us. But tonight, I didn't, if you plan to end on this note, this is the most inspirational part, because we are, all the people who have been on our list of, what did Larry say? And I'm almost done with my introduction. That are either mercy and pity or accolades. I mean, there's, how did you?
It's either inspiration with Rhoda, and I know they call it inspiration porn because it's so relentless. And the other one is pity. So that's the rides, the swims and the bike rides and the marathons, and all to raise money for medical research. But there's not, I mean, it's not that it's totally that way, but it's overwhelmingly that way. And they're just not substantive issues and problems being addressed. And that's why, you know, I do know what the Rudiments are doing. They're tending to focus right now, along with their Israeli interests, on Hollywood and mental health issues. And so they're pushing the studios and the the producers to come up with more characters. And it's a good effort. They have lots of money behind them. The problem is that there's only about 2% of all the characters have any disability. So even if they triple it in the next 5 years, they'd beat up to 6%. So, and it's certainly fine. I'm just saying, we got a show, as Rhoda and I say, it's the old Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. Let's put a show on, and it's going to be on, and there it is. And out of reality television, real television, came Oprah Winfrey, and also came Ellen DeGeneres, who have broken a lot of ground. And so that's the hope, that people will see some of these people, some of the talented people who are already running businesses or contributing, and they'll want to hire more of them. It's sort of that simple-minded. If you see it, it breaks down your stereotypes that are sort of embedded. Oh my God, the ramp, and then there's the insurance issue, and then there's the other issue. Oh no, we should hire that. Wow, you can do that. So that's sort of the way it works, I think.
And I think maybe if there was a studio where there was funded for people to come and record, because music has an incredible, I mean, I don't know how this happens, but I look at, like, I guess the measurement today is how many likes or views you have. It's like a currency. And there's some videos that get a lot of attention. I don't see any reason why, if there's a good studio that was well funded for people with other abilities and different abilities, to broadcast the message of inclusion and the message of equality in this particular field. So Rhoda, the fact that you're in Berkeley, I mean, you're in the hub, you're in the center of the spokes. So I'd love to have an offline conversation with you sometime if you are interested. I don't know if I can help, but I'm certainly enthusiastic.
I appreciate that. I'd be happy to have a conversation. Everything we're doing right now is fully remote, so it's a very different universe. I think when we can get back in person, it'll make a big difference. We're very successful remote. All our programming is functioning very, very well, but it does change the feeling of community. We're working really hard to keep our community feeling connected. But yes, sure, Noam, I'd be very happy to have an offline conversation. My email is in the chat, So feel free to send me an email.
Just as a side note and a reflection, we are a community right now, convening through a Zoom connection. I feel we are a community. I know if you go like a larger amount of people, there are more challenges, but there are also solutions to create communal feeling within a virtual world with music, actually. So anyway, I'll look at your email, and Artemis is a good old friend, so I'm sure we'll be in touch. Thank you so much. And I apologize for such a long introduction, but I was very inspired by your words, and also by yours, Larry.
Well, thank you. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, we're hopefully developing a community of people who want to participate, talk in this manner, not in the conflicted way that most television, stirs up, and our politics is brimming with right now. And just say how we can push this forward, because there's another show that Rhoda knows about in Artemis called Rolling Across America with Chris Waddell that was at GBH, and then of course the virus came. So traveling across the country with a person in a wheelchair didn't seem possible. But so there, I think once we open the door, like a lot of other things, other programming ideas will occur, other efforts, other people will come on board, because they'll just see it and they'll know that this is the right thing to do, that the Declaration of Independence doesn't say, all able-bodied people are equal. It's, it really means for everybody, and that notion of equality has to extend to 56 million people. It's an enormous amount of people who are disenfranchised right now.
Mm.
Well, and this is the point I wanted people to think about as they introduce themselves. For me, the word disabled represents those 20% of the population, world population. So of 8 billion people, we're talking about a billion, half to almost a billion people who are disabled. But the notion of being differently abled is something all of us can relate to, because all of us truly have gifts and we have challenges in life. And these gifts and challenges need to be somehow actualized in a reverential and inspiring way to live. And so being differently abled is really inclusion of everyone, where being disabled is more of the group that is disabled relative to everyone. But my argument is that they're both the same. And that really, when we reframe the language around what we're talking about, we can all find a connection to it relative to our own lives. And really, that's the point that I wanted to share with everybody about those different distinctions. With that, Andrew and Brenda, will you share a little bit about your experience of being differently abled or disabled?
Well, I'd like to say something. First, I wanted to ask Larry and Rhoda if you're connected with the ARC of Massachusetts.
I am.
Yeah, so
No Limits is not, no.
I was the development director for the ARC for 12 years. And I actually spoke to Leo Sarkissian today. Leo's the executive director of the ARC, and I invited him to come. I invited him yesterday, but we spoke today, and he had another commitment tonight, but he said that he would be very happy to join another time. But, for those, Larry, do you know about the ARC?
I do, and I actually tried to reach out to them, and also to this gentleman Rosenthal, who I think he at least gave the North Shore ARC $1 million to help spur small business activity among developmentally disabled people, and to invite him to be one of the people to be interviewed, but he didn't respond. I don't know why he didn't, but I know a little bit about it. Yeah.
Well, so the ARC of Mass is the it's a statewide advocacy organization that advocates for individuals with specifically developmental and intellectual and developmental disabilities, which includes autism. But in any event, I know they have employment programs. And if you go to their website, the ARC of Massachusetts, you'll see they even have a link that's all about employment. But, I was thinking, I remember coming across a young woman, Jessica Vos, VOHS, and she actually has a website, and she's absolutely amazing. She is an artist, and she does watercolors, and she's got cerebral palsy, and she paints with her feet, and she's amazing, and she has beautiful work. And if you go to her website, you can see her art. Anyway, I was inspired by many individuals with disabilities, musicians included, while I was at the ARC. Anyway, so I was just very interested in connecting any of you who are interested with the ARC of Massachusetts. And Leo is a terrific guy. He's the executive director, as I said, of the ARC of Mass. So I just put that out there because he will come back. He will come, and we'll just give him a little more notice the next time. But they're a terrific organization.
Yeah, no, Artemis had suggested the other day, which I think is a terrific idea, to have a Zoom meeting the night of the first broadcast and through the other 3 episodes to get people's reaction, to get their ideas of how we build upon this. Years ago, I worked in the Office of Human Services, so I know if I had the resources, I would have somebody researching all of the programs, governmental at the state level, the federal level, that are out there around this issue of employment, but I don't. But that's what has to be constructed, so that there's like a network that tunes in and talks and says, oh, we got our own show now. We've got a place to, gather on a Saturday, or, you can see it at other times, and talk this out, so that, shortly before the crash occurred because of the virus, employment of people with disabilities or differently abled people had gone up, which was pretty good. And then, of course, now we've been in this terrible recession, not reflected on Wall Street, but still millions of people have been unemployed. So those gains after such a long time of no attraction, and the efforts, there are a number of corporations beside Intuit, Intel, and Cisco, and there's others who are trying. So we all have to pull together, and hopefully a show like this is a place for people to gather and get themselves into a community and push in the one direction, so that we can look back in 2 or 3 years and say, well, 35,000 people were hired, or whatever the number is, to have some way of signifying that this had an impact, and then we can keep building on it. But I know there's a lot of efforts. It's just the efforts have sputtered for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, and this is also a nationwide organization, the ARC.
Right.
And it was started by parents, and they're just amazing. I mean, parents go to great lengths.
Yes, they do.
So it's a really strong organization.
That would be great. I'd love to be connected to them and potentially interview. If we can do more shows, if we can. I mean, the goal here is to get it on weekly or semi-weekly or monthly, so that it's a stable series. And I think my background's editorial. I think the stories are endless. I mean, there's not going to be, oh, we ran out of stories after 8 episodes. So I don't think that's even close. It can go on for years. And hopefully we'll have impact, which is what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm happy to connect you with Leo.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Guy.
Yeah.
So about your question about differently abled, well, it's a little tricky to talk about, because I know that I'm differently abled in certain areas, and I have like Noam said, I have a general sense of it, and I have frustrations that I've had in my life, but it doesn't really have a label. I just know there are certain things that I'm just terrible at. And then there are certain things that I'm very strong with. So the frustrating things, it's like, for example, when I left the ARC and I just thought I'd do part-time work, I tried doing admin work. And here I was a development director and I had a staff of people that did admin work. So I thought, oh, I'll work for a church, a Unitarian church, and I'll do administrative work. And I tried that. And I was terrible. I mean, it was just like, it just was not for me. And, I mean, he's laughing because he knows, I tried, but, I couldn't do it. So, but I'm great at leading people and and other things. But I ended up going into doing infant care and helping new mothers when they have babies. And that was more for me, but as a part-time fun job, And anyway, so, and it's very frustrating when you're what you consider you're an accomplished person, you were a professional. And then there are just some things you just are not good at. And so I'm just really in favor of us being aware of our different strengths and abilities, and that we all have gifts to offer. And it's just like I can sing, but we all have different gifts. And, we join together in community and we can share our various gifts and we can accept one another for our differences. And so that's my thought. And the only other thing I'd say is, as I talked to Artemis about, I really like Myers-Briggs, the personality indicator, because it's very good it's a very helpful way to understand one another, because you learn about what our different preferences are in the world. And it's really important to know because, preferences even have a really strong effect on what we do in the world. So I could talk about this forever, but I'll stop. And do you want to?
Yeah, I'll say a few.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Andy, and I guess my first experience that was really powerful was I guess it's in the late 70s. I had a friend named Peter Slakowski, who I mentioned Artemis Joukowsky to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, Artemis was famous for the work he was doing." Peter now lives in Kentucky. I haven't seen him in decades, but he lit right up when I mentioned Artemis. Anyhow, Peter and I became good friends. He's blind, and we went on this 5-day canoe trip in the wilderness in the Adirondacks. And, so we each had to carry half the canoe and stuff like that. Well, we set out, and then I got incredibly sick. I had some kind of flu, like I was incapacitated. So basically he had to carry the canoe, put me in the canoe, then, he'd paddle in the back and I'd be up in the front, and I could just get my eyes over the gunnel and I'd say, a little to the left, and he'd paddle across this lake, and he saved my ass, but we had a great time. We just laughed, and he's differently abled. He's much more competent than me in just about every area, but anyhow, that was a powerful experience. Then I ran a day program for people with disabilities in Concord, New Hampshire for a year. And I loved it. Just loved working with the people, because we had a great art teacher. It was a lot of fun. We laughed. It was just great. I just enjoyed the work. And there was something else I was going to say, but I forgot it. Anyhow, I'm delighted to be, I'm a little bit of an imposter. The extent of my disability is that I don't have this joint in my thumb, and it affects my handwriting. Oh, it's terrible. But yeah, she's talking about, yeah, I have all kinds of mental problems, but
no, you don't.
They're like everyday neuroses, attention deficit disorder, depression comes along. What were some of the others? Anyhow, Brenda's great for taking care of me too. So thank you all. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I think the point Artemis is making, and we're trying to make in this show, and other things that No Limits has done, is that we're trying to break down this thing of the other, which is, anti-Semitism and racism, and in this area too, is that they're not quite human, or they're really different from us. And by focusing on differently abled, or the things that people can do well and can't do well, you suddenly are humbled by saying, well, this person can't do this because they can't see, but they also are really good at that. And then you realize, oh, we can do something together instead of saying they're over there. And the more we create that commonality, or co-membership is a term I learned a long time ago, the more powerful the relationship becomes. And in terms of work, one of the things, you didn't see it, but in the interview with the chief diversity officer at Intuit, they're very much focused on bringing people's authentic self to the workplace. And they did some survey that found their employees were only bringing about 60% of their being to the workplace. And they're trying to break that down, because if you're not bringing 40% of yourself to what they're doing, there's going to be a lot lower levels of creativity. And eventually you might go out of business and not meet your stock expectations. So in a very real business way, by bringing people in with disabilities with other people, and if you're in a wheelchair, you have to be authentic. You are in a wheelchair. You can't hide. You can't run and pretend you're not there. So that's why it's so important to get this legally, and in the nomenclature, it's people with disabilities. But in terms of what Artemis is saying, once we get that perspective and see the gifts people can bring, we want to share the gifts. We want to give our gifts to them instead of saying, well, they're over there. God knows, as you said, fear. What if I go over there? What are they going to do? Anyways, other people need to talk.
In that spirit, Giselle, being a mom of 5 differently abled boys, what do you have to say about being differently abled?
I think it's been the journey of my life. I love going into my children's world. I do have the fear that once I am not around, what might happen. I took a job working in adult foster care and in agencies that assist people with disabilities in order to create the world I want to see. So right now I am a community liaison for 2 companies that deal with people with disabilities. And in that, I found my fulfillment in doing that kind of work, just because I want to build a world for my children. I want to see what the foster homes look like. I want to see what the group home setting looks like. Ultimately, my goal is to create group homes that are comfortable and livable, and that my children can live independently. So, creating that's been a real passion for me. My son was a victim of a non-fatal drowning accident in a special needs camp. So that kind of woke me up. Like, even the special needs camp wasn't safe. And I started a foundation that pays for children to learn how to swim. We have put 100 children in the water already since 2018 to really learn water safety and how to be around water. Children with autism love water. They gravitate towards water. It's soothing. So I wanted to make sure that our children, and especially in the inner cities where we don't have a lot of money and there's not a lot of funding and insurance is not helping families, we want to give some type of hope that a child will be safe in those settings without it being a barrier for a family. So I love the conversation. Thank you, Artemis, for inviting me. I'm doing remote learning with my children with disability now. I do circle time. I have become a speech pathologist. I have become an OT specialist and a special needs teacher. But the love of music, especially for Malik, he's starting to learn how to play the piano now. Today he had music class and he was playing the piano. It's so important. He's 11, he's nonverbal, and that's his way of communicating to me. through songs, and he sings his way through the house.
Oh,
So
wow.
I love what you guys are doing. I would love to help with production if you need to. You guys could feature my family because my children cook for themselves. They're learning to do laundry. I am teaching them life skills, and I'm kind of building them to be the most independent adults they can be.
It's great. Really great. Rhoda's left, but before the pandemic hit, we had started on a book. There are no books in this area, which was for parents and how the arts could help them with their children. So once this sort of lets up and we can go back to that restaurant, maybe meet. But the arts are very powerful, and to know that your son sings his way through the house is must be joyous for you. And again, you just need to recognize it. I mean, people need to recognize that he may have real talent, or he could just be part of a community choir or anything like that. He wouldn't need to be shunned to the side. And that's what Rhoda's Institute does. She has a remarkable intake process, which we're going to describe in the book. Her sensitivity to dealing with a child who's brought in by the parents who are, of course, very nervous, and they're looking for help, and how she interacts and the knowledge she's learned to enroll them in the Institute is the kind of knowledge we wanted to impart to parents, and how they can really bring their children through the arts to a higher level of enjoyment and
And Larry, about that resource list, put your contact in the chat. I have created my own. I know every single resource you can imagine in the state of Massachusetts. Every single grant a family can get. That's been my goal, to create this big resource list where people could come and just take a look at it, and hopefully one day it'll be an app. So please, I would love to have a further conversation with you.
Yeah. There's somebody I've had contact with who's developing this for caretakers. His mother passed away from Alzheimer's. My stepmother did. So I got very familiar with caretakers. And, there's millions of caretakers dealing with adult people with disabilities, or, older people who are in decline. And he's put together 2,500 organizations. I mean, it's out there. It's just nobody can access it easily. Once he launches this thing, people will be able to go on a computer and look under Alzheimer's and look for a group, like in San Diego where I was, and find that group and start chatting with other people and get people to help one another. Because as you know, there's a lot of stress on parents with these children, and if you feel alone or you don't have ideas of what to do, if you can reach out to other parents who would be glad to help. If it was easy to do, then you just get on and say, oh, well, my boy. And then, so what we did was, I hope that helps you. It'd be a fantastic way for a gigantic segment of our community that's suffering in isolation as they deal with aging parents and their children, to help one another. So that's great that you've done that.
And also movies. It was hard for me. Like I love watching movies, and when my children were disabled, I watched Fly Away. I watched when Sesame Street came up with the Muppet. I was super excited. It was something that was never there, and just the small steps that we're taking towards making different abilities normal, because you're not less, you're just different. And we have to all live amongst our differences. So just Sesame Street doing that, although the child was, higher functioning than most kids with autism, it was nice to see. I live in a community where disabilities don't show, we tend to hide in our houses. So it's been good that, there's more awareness around disabilities, and it's been my goal all along to just come out to the world and build the world we want to see for our children when we're not here. So as a mom, that's really what I want to do.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Incredible.
So I want Sydney and Guinevere and Joanne to introduce yourselves next. Whatever order you want, but I want to hear from all of you.
Sure. I don't mind going. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Can hear you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, it's really amazing to be on here tonight, and I'm just blown away. Noam's comment about this being a crazy way to end the series, it really is. It's really inspiring and hopeful to see a group of people who are differently able coming together to drive awareness around just needing to incorporate and integrate more people who are differently abled into our workforce and communities. And I love what you mentioned, Giselle. I think that's beautiful. And I just mentioned in the chat, we do have David McCauley coming on in a few minutes. And we spoke about healing arts and how powerful that is. And he actually has an organization called Rise Up. It's a nonprofit that leads educational programs for differently abled people, specifically art programs. So he teaches all different kinds of people how to use different instruments depending on their disability to work with art in different mediums. And he'll be joining us soon. So I'm really excited about that. But my work is the creative zone. I started that a few years ago to hold space for all different kinds of healing modalities and healing arts and nonprofit organizations and social impact oriented entrepreneurs and people who are living life by design and really committed to using their gifts to serve humanity. So the fact that you guys are using your gifts to make a difference, Giselle, the resource list you're compiling, Larry and Artemis and others here, it's amazing that you're using your time and energy and resources towards this cause. It's so meaningful and important. And yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here. So thank you guys.
Yes. Artemis, with your permission.
Intermission.
Intermission. Good.
As you're able, I'm not ableist in the sense of standing, but I'm going to dance to your music in my wheelchair.
Right.
Right.
Don't you other, don't other the other, or the other will other you, and the othering will never stop. Stop the othering. Stop the othering. And publicize the Bloomberg show so millions watch it. So.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you. And nice dancing, Artemis.
Artemis, you are so able, wheelchair able. I mean, where do you get those like pirouettes? Yeah, pirouettes. Wheelchair pirouettes. Bravo. Oh!
It's high in you.
Okay, a little moment of levity, because this is I am interested to know how are you going to publicize the event so there'll be many, many, many watchers, because
Can I say hello to everybody? Hi, everybody.
Hi, Gwen.
I'm so glad you guys are here tonight. This is my third really long Zoom meeting. And so I just want to share with you guys what my day was like today, because it was just so amazing and exciting. And it's so perfect that this is happening tonight. So today I had a reasonably long meeting about a playground that's being put in here at the community that I live in. And I wanted to be sure to be there so that all of the accommodations are there and everything is also going to be available for children who are abled. And so we talked about that, and the way it ends up is ultimately the kids in the neighborhood are going to be making the final decisions. So that was an exciting meeting to look at the plan for that. And then my next meeting was with Grow Food Northampton, and it was a wonderful potluck dinner. It was the 10th anniversary of the birth of Grow Food Northampton, and the meeting was opened up with Mary Jo Comerford and Lindsay Sabadoza and Mr. McGovern. And so that was really, really exciting. Talking about how the garden had expanded, talking about different programs. There's a program there to help people who are other abled. There were some grants, and there was a woman who did a lot of work with that. So that was amazing. And then I also want to share that I too am a parent of an other abled child. He's my firstborn, and it's been an incredible journey. And so I feel all of this, and I'm also an other abled person who found out that I was other abled as a grown-up. And so that's been actually pretty awakening as well. But I'm going to stop now because I missed like a lot of the early part of this meeting, and I want to hear what you guys are talking about doing. Yeah.
Ginevra, so good to see you again.
Hey, Ben, thank you for introducing yourself. Basically, there are a few people left, myself included, but we were talking recently just about in ways in which we might be differently abled. So did you want to just add to that?
Sure. So I had a lot of challenges understanding mathematical concepts as a child. And I also had a lot of experiences involving social stuff as a child. And so I didn't have a supportive family. I think they just were so afraid that there would be something wrong with me that the denial just felt better than making that, a reality. So my diagnosis is ADHD with somatic responses to things in my environment. And so one of the reasons why I was having a challenge learning is because I could learn better if I had, this in my hand, and then I also have this in my hand, or I'm jumping up and down, increases my learning. So it was always like this vicious cycle where it was like, my mother was trying to get me to sit down at the table and do my homework, and I just couldn't do it. So that was like, that's one thing. And then the other thing is just the aging. As we age, we have old injuries that come back, and it's really annoying. And so that's been my most recent challenge. And my son was born with 2 heart defects. And when he was 3 weeks old, he contracted whooping cough. And so he was born a blue baby, and he had numerous surgical procedures and exploratory procedures until finally we ended up having to open up the heart. That was in 1988. So it was still scary at that time. And before that, he suffered from whooping cough. And so between the whooping cough and the struggle afterwards, after the heart surgery, he suffered hypoxia numerous times. And so it's been a challenge to sort of get people to people just want to slap you onto medication, or they're so quick to run to the big pharma, as opposed to the use of therapy, art therapy, occupational type things, planting, growing in the garden, just playing in the dirt and just being, and just with him, it was just I was such a young mom. I feel badly about how things went for my son educationally, but at the same time, he is 32 now, and he says he apologizes a lot for the way he was when he was younger, which he doesn't have to do. And he also thanks me because he doesn't think that he could have been as good of a person as he is if he didn't have that structure. The other thing is, I just want to jump ahead to the age between 18 and 23, and then even beyond that, even now, it's been, he's run away from programs, and there's just not a lot of funding for folks like my son who are adult and they have all of the natural human drives. Just by their diagnosis doesn't make them not human, and so it's been really hard, really hard. And so it's mild MMR there, and some other stuff. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
So Joanne and Tina, we haven't heard from either of you lovely ladies.
Lovely ladies. Oh, I haven't been called that in about ever. Thank you. This has been amazing.
Well, I mean,
Thank
so
you,
I'm
Artemis,
Tina, and had plenty of time to think about whatever different abilities I have.
Can't hear you?
Can anybody hear me?
Heard you earlier, but keep going.
I have a bad connection. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Whenever I can, but nobody else.
I can.
Okay, so I'm pretty different ability free. I just really have always had my health. I've been really trying to have pronated feet. Makes exercising, sometimes balancing or doing yoga a little challenging, but I mean, it's not, and I can't, but I do have two boys, and they both have different abilities. They're old, they're grown now, and nothing profound. One had learning disability, and the first one did have executive dysfunction with, secondary anxieties and things like that. So he really presented a lot and was explosive a lot. So I learned as he taught me about accepting and understanding that, to view and perceive people like my son as being just like everybody else. He's just going through something in his head. So I felt blessed to have my son because he did teach me a lot. And then, but since I'm having my turn, I was wondering, since you all are very, I admire you and applaud you for all your efforts with your institutes and nonprofits and willingness and resourcefulness to help these people. I mean, each one of you, that earlier guest with her music, I know I don't have to tell you, music is the ministry of love. It is. So if you can bring music to people, that's wonderful. And Brenda, you bring music to people. It's the ministry of love. But what I wanted to, my point that I wanted to make was, children don't discriminate. Adults discriminate. If we could teach as children to somehow keep their innocence and their acceptance and their perception of people with different abilities, and not end up discriminating. I don't know what happens between being a child and being an adult where you grow this discrimination. I don't know where it comes from. But somehow, like, if we could figure that out and tap it and bottle it and sell it or something, it would be great. It would really, that was just something I was thinking about, that children don't discriminate, adults do. And if we could just try to get children to stay children as they develop, I don't know where the discrimination comes from. I mean, it's perplexing to me. So I'll end my turn there. Thanks.
I want to add why I think we lose that wonder. I call it wonder. You can say, I don't know what's going on here, and I don't like it. Or you can say, I don't know what's going on here, and I like it. And wonder is about, I don't know, and I'm having fun learning. I'm curious. And you see that with good schools where kids are able to find themselves and discover themselves. Where I think what we lose culturally is, I don't know what's going on here and I don't like it. And it's a fear of being a beginner. It's a fear of learning. It's a fear of being open-hearted. And I think that's what happens between childhood and adulthood in our society, is we learn to be, in quotes, adult by having really skepticism, having discernment, having prejudice, having, I don't like that person because they're that way, rather than, oh, I don't know that person, I'm going to like them because I don't know. We're going to find out. So I think that's part of why I think that it's a kind of an attitude toward learning in our spirits.
I also think it's the agenda of, are you receiving because you're interested in connection and community, or do you have and I think that a group like this can feel, I don't know, maybe there's a shift happening where we're realizing we don't have the system play the game. We can do things differently, and clearly you guys are, because of what you're doing, especially with this inclusion at work series. So thank you, Artemis.
And Joanne, where are you, my dear?
I'm coming. Here I am. 1 sec. Hi, and just was speaking before and saying thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm really beyond impressed with what people are doing, and it's very just optimistic and promising. And this is so helpful to me. I feel incredibly isolated in many ways. We all do, but let me just maybe give a little background. So my background is as a midwife and a nurse and a body worker. Was doing massage therapy and acupressure and licensed and all of those things for 25 to 30 years in my life. I took a break when my son, Corey, who is the same age as Gwen, your son is, he was born in 87. He had a severe traumatic brain injury when he was 10. He went boogie boarding with a friend we didn't know on our front forest, and he fractured his skull on a tree, and he wasn't going to make it. And it's a remarkable thing that how well he's doing. But I learned so much about OT and PT, and I already was into a lot of alternative things, cranial sacral and acupuncture, and all the people in our community came to the intensive care unit. Bay State let them in. He had an incredible neurosurgeon, and he had such a low chance of being functional, and he's incredibly functional overall. 32, engaged to be married, director of a Alzheimer's unit, activities director for an Alzheimer's unit in a nursing home in West Springfield. He graduated from college. He went through hell through this, though, lost every friend. He was very differently abled, and some of his personality traits from before his head injury still have persevered, but so much of his personality changed. And it was such a hard time to watch him grow up. And I'm so grateful to have and proud of him. So needless to say, as a nurse and a very interested person in medicine and healing, I did everything I could to help him. And so that has informed my background. And I'm so appreciative of every speech pathologist and physical therapist and know different styles within that. I had to ask sometimes for a different person. So grateful to. Funny thing, real quickly, is that I have a lot of physical issues, and I went to see the person who operated on my neck recently. And I noticed the doctor who was added to the roster outside the door was Corey's neurosurgeon from 20 some odd years ago.
Wow.
And I was like, I got so teary, and he couldn't wait to meet me again. And he did remember what Corey, and I remembered him, and he saved his life really, because his brain herniated 2-3 days after the accident, which is unusual. But Camille Khalida, and he didn't age a bit. But anyway, just to get back to where I'm at, I just appreciate everything you're doing. And I also come from a background where I was married for 25 years to a incredible networker and public policy servant who, so I understand networking. He worked for John Olver, who was a congressman, and then he became a senator, and he worked for the food bank for years. So we're still friends. But personally, I developed severe asthma about 12 years ago, living in this house that was on a pond, and it was moldy, and it was very, very old. And 3 out of 4 of us got very sick, but I developed life-threatening asthma and have been on steroids for 12 years, and I keep getting down. And then I actually haven't been hospitalized for over a year. I think February is a year. But as a result of all these medications, and then I developed really severe rheumatoid arthritis and adrenal insufficiency, my whole life changed, and I've been disabled as a result. And I have a lot of pain, and I'm doing so much better right now. I'm so grateful. But I have learned a lot, and I apply all of the holistic measures I know, along with, I think I'm blessed with a pretty good attitude. I'm much more tired than I ever was. But I have a gratitude and a love of people, for people, and being in the moment. I've learned to, that's all we can do. Is age does that too, but being in the moment. And so that I'm in a new phase that's a little more positive. It's, and I have had a lot of surgeries and broken bones, but I'm getting through. And I love Artemis for his example. And if it weren't for COVID, I'd be in the pool too. And I'm so blessed with a program called Stavros in Northampton that provides me with 30 some odd hours a week of help. But I have less because I pay those people more, the way I work it out, because they're so capable and competent. And I have so much respect for anyone who has a disabled child who's working with the system. And I have a lot of experience, or I have a good friend whose daughter just passed away after 33 years of spina bifida, but she's the fiercest, smartest advocate there is. And so that's me in a nutshell. Not so big shell. Thank you.
And Giselle, I would love for you to introduce us to Malik right next to you.
Oh, Malik went upstairs. I'll get him back down. As soon as Noam starts singing, he'll come back.
Okay.
He has his ring stick right here. He'll be right back.
So we'll have Patrick come next, and then Noam, you play to get Malik back in the room. Patrick, we're talking about your experience with disability.
Hi, Patrick.
And
hi.
Very nice Northampton group here. Western Mass, Joanne and Guinevere and Patrick and Giselle. We have a Western Mass hub here. But share some of the work you did, Patrick, around dance and disability, because I think that's very powerful what you experienced in that teaching environment.
Well, there were two. Well, there are a number of things, but the thing that you're referring to is that in Boston, when I lived in Boston, I worked with Access to Theater, which is a dance theater troupe for disabled kids and young adults. And I worked with them for many years. They're part of a larger organization called Partners for Youth with Disabilities. And there was a wide range of people with disabilities, with a lot of people with CP who were in wheelchairs, and people with learning disabilities were also there, and people with Down syndrome. And we would, in 3 weeks, we would create a whole show from nothing. And I was the movement person, there was a theater person, and there was an art person, and we'd pull it all together. And we'd start with nothing, and then we'd do like 3 performances at the end. And it was very fascinating. One of the things that struck me the most, because of my experience with contact improvisation, which is this movement form where you spend time learning how to get in and out of the floor. You do a lot of floor movement to begin. And one of the things that the kids loved the most was, a lot of them were in wheelchairs. And what they loved the most was, I would tell them at the beginning, okay, everyone out of their wheelchairs. We're coming onto the floor. And most of them had aids. And so the aids would help them. But one of the things I would teach them is don't help them so much. And, the aids were all really quite wonderful and very well-meaning. But what the kids said is that their aids pretty much helped them too much. And they didn't get to experience things as much. So they just loved that I told them, you're getting on the floor. And it wasn't necessarily easy even to do that. And they weren't used to even being on the floor. Like most people who are able-bodied are not used to being on the floor really that much. So, but that one thing is what they would mention at the end was so significant for them. Plus all this creativity. I mean, I remember there was this one story of this woman, young woman, and she had CP, and she could get out of her chair, and she had braces on her legs, and she could walk about an inch. Each foot would move about an inch. Obvious, so very little, and she would have to hold on to something or hold on to somebody. But what I discovered by working with her is that her legs were actually quite strong, and she could support my full body weight on her legs. So at one point in a performance, we had her on her back with her legs up in the air, doing airplane on me. And there are 300 people in the audience, and most everyone knows each other and knew her. And so the movement was, she was on her back with her legs up, and my body was on top of her legs. And I would go on her and go up, go off of her, go up, go down off of her, and go up. The first time I went up on her, there was just everyone gasped in the audience because they all knew her, and they said, what the hell is this person doing with her? And by the end, they were just like, they just couldn't believe it. And she was, if you could really, if you worked, if you just listened, they all found new possibilities in their movement, and you just had to get out of the box, and it was just very inspiring. They all loved it. And we don't have to, we don't have to be so careful with our disabilities.
I just want to let you know that someone's just joined us and has been brought downstairs. So maybe we want to interrupt to hear this person come join us, because is Noam there? Noam,
Yes, I'm here.
Tell me if I'm directing too much, but I felt like somebody came down to join us. Is that David? What is your son's name?
Yes.
Giselle? I don't want to bring you down too long.
No, Malik is here. He's
Malika, sorry. So Patrick, you didn't see what came before, but
David came in.
And Malik came in. So Malik and David just arrived. And David's going to speak a little bit about his work around arts and disability.
I thought Malik was asked to come down here.
Malik is here, and Noam, I think we need a...
Malik's been waiting. Malik's been waiting for his turn.
That's what I'm trying to explain.
Okay.
So if Noam could play, we were told Malik would want to join us.
yeah, look at them playing.
Thank you.
Who has joined us tonight? Who are all these people on the screen? Oh, what are we talking about? Oh, equality. Everyone measures one for one, yeah. No other reason. Just David and Malik,
I will all
Noah and Patrick, and Artemis and Andy and Brenda and Larry,
Hi.
Joanne.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you, Noam. That was beautiful.
All right, Malik. Music
down.
is finished.
Good job, Noam.
Going.
Thank you, Noam.
Everyone put it up for Malik. Malik.
Right, Malik.
Hi. All right, Malik. Music time is all finished.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, 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 shit.
You are muted.
Shit. Dun, dun, shit. Oh, shit, dun, 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 shit. Malik, oh, okay, dun, 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 take. Say something, Malik. I papele to cha. For you, the music.
All done.
Woo! And with that introduction, David, we want to warmly welcome you and your wonderful connection to Sid and your work. And just, you have to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Someone else dancing in the background there.
Sorry about that. I thought Sydney was in charge, or somebody else was in charge of all the mutes, and who was. Hey everybody, how's it going?
Hi, David.
David, you're in charge.
Welcome, David. You're in charge now.
I'm in charge of my own mute
You're in
button.
charge of this whole.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Apologies for joining late, but thank you for welcoming me tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, you want me to dive right in and start talking about it?
And
Yeah, we want to hear all about you. We've been waiting all night.
I want to know how you know Sydney.
I'm sorry?
I want to know how you know Sydney.
We met in a coffee shop in St. Petersburg, Florida.
And that's where you are now, Florida?
I'm in St. Pete, yes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I'm going in, it's cannonball, I just jump in, yeah. All right.
Yeah, just dive right in. No fear. It's where you get it.
Experiences.
Okay, so I'm a C6 quadriplegic and I have been for almost 11 years now. And prior to that, I worked in business development and sales for finance and technology. And about 10 years ago, I launched a nonprofit after I left my career on Wall Street that was, centered around, focused on art therapy workshops in the New York and New Jersey area, and also like fundraising for and advocacy for those types of causes. And then I moved down to Miami a year or so after I launched that program, and opened up a gallery in the Wynwood Art District, which was focusing on showcasing the artwork of people with disabilities. And I ran that for a couple of years. But throughout that time, I was also partnering with Jackson Memorial Hospital, which is the major rehabilitation hospital in Miami, trauma center. It's where all the spinal cord injury people go. And we launched our art therapy program there. They brought us in-house. So we got our own space, not just to do our workshops, but also to exhibit the work, which was really fantastic. So if you ever go to Jackson, there's, we have our gallery space and all the hallways kind of like lined with our artwork. Even outside, we've done murals on the exterior parts of the building, which was like a no-no in the beginning, but after they saw how cool it was and the experience of a lot of people, they were like, okay, yeah, you can continue to do whatever walls you want. And then fast forward, I worked launching art residency programs, a place called the Laundromat Art Space, as well as Void Projects in Miami. And we're working on something else over in Spain, in Cadiz. It's not disability focused, it's just more art advocacy. And I'm also a disabled sailor and helmsman and board member of the Impossible Dream Project, which I spoke with Larry and Artemis about yesterday. And that's a wheelchair accessible sailing catamaran that is based out of Miami, but every summer we do a 4,000-mile voyage for 4 months from Miami to Maine and back. And we partner with the top, rehabilitation hospitals along the Eastern Seaboard. And we take their inpatients and outpatients sailing to show them an experience. And it's not a push to have them be accessible sailors or disabled sailors. It's more of a metaphor for, look, you're coming out of the hospital in the next couple weeks, couple months. The world is full of possibilities. We sailed here from Miami. So it's a really beautiful mission. And I love seeing people, I was speaking with the gentleman yesterday about tears running down their face in terms of fear getting on the boat. And then 2 hours later, after we've sailed around Boston Harbor, and they come home with like, they're grinning ear to ear. And it's really a beautiful experience. And I love sharing it with them. And I just want to continue the advocacy. And when I talk to Artemis and Sydney and Larry about the programming they're going to be doing on Bloomberg and the documentaries that they've done in the past, I just, I want to jump on board, and anything I can do to help promote and keep that momentum moving forward, I'm down to do.
I want to compliment the connection of disability with art, because all of us, whether we're great artists like Monet or not, doesn't mean we can't express ourselves artistically. And that in that expression, we are more whole, we're more authentic, we're more seen by others for being unique or special. And I think the gift of what you're doing, David, and what excites me so much from the standpoint of No Limits Media is that media embedded in all of us is the desire to be connected to each other, however that happens. And what I see with this format and what Sydney has done with us is to create these ongoing communities. So think of this as the first conversation about our collaborations. And one of the people that left the show earlier that I'd like you to connect with is the woman who writes the adaptive arts program at Berklee School of Music.
Oh, wow.
And that's another connection in Boston when you come back up here. But we can actually connect you guys by Skype or Zoom, even easier. So the idea is, how do we create a kind of a kind of momentum shift toward people with disabilities are not the curse of society, or not have to be put into rooms, separate us, but are our teachers, our avatars of certain kinds of experiences that each of us, in our pretension or fear of being judged, aren't able to express ourselves. But people with disabilities like Malik is authentic every minute and is playing music every minute. And that expression of music for Malik is a saving grace for him, because he then is part of a chorus. You know, he's part of a community already. And that's what I think all people need, is to be part of a community and to believe that we're doing something that's bigger than ourselves, that we are contributing to something. And that's what you've done, David.
Thank you, Artemis.
I would love for you to talk about the moment you realized that your disability was a gift. The moment you realized that it wasn't like poor David, but like, whoa, David is here.
Okay, that was a layup, because you just gave me an alley-oop, because that was on the tip of my tongue, listening to you speak about artists with disabilities. Two things. I was at an art residency I participated. I was awarded a fellowship to go to the Vermont Studio Center a few years ago. And during my month-long residency up there, they bring in all types of internationally renowned artists. They come in, do studio visits with you, give you critiques on your work and things like that. And I was showing the work that I was currently working on there in Vermont with the big dog. I don't know if it's fair to name drop and things like that, but he came into my studio and was critiquing my work. And I was explaining to him my process, which oftentimes it's I'm 6'6" quad, so I have very limited hand dexterity. So I was explaining my process to him in terms of how I utilize my brushes. And I would put a wheelchair glove on tight, and I would have it in there. Sometimes I would paint with a piece of bamboo if I wanted to be off of my canvas, 2, 3, 4 feet. So I was actually perpendicular to seeing what I'm creating. And I was always hard on myself in terms of not having accurate brushstrokes in certain areas when I was really trying to do some fine detail. And he was like, he grabbed my shoulders and he said, "David, let that go. Everybody else that gets taught oil painting, fine art painting, fine portrait painting strives to be what you're trying to do. You don't have to do that if you don't have that skill. Nobody else is going to have the mark making techniques that you have. If I'm coming from my elbow because my wrist isn't accurate, or I don't have that same dexterity in my fingers, it's completely unique." And that's what people want to see is, to me, art is like push-ups and free throws. You can get good at it. Do your daily practice. Go out there and shoot 100 free throws. Draw 20 portraits in a day. If you did that every day, you would have that same skill set as your mentor, the master, your teacher, right? But if you're somebody with a disability and all of a sudden you're doing movements from your shoulder or from your elbow or from, it's limited and it's different, and 100% it's unique. And when I had that studio visit and he said, "Your mark making is unique to you. Nobody else does it like that." And even if you think about the elbow as like a pivot point, I was always down on myself for not doing beautiful straight brush strokes, right? I'm coming from the shoulder. I'm coming from the elbow. Completely different situation than having super fine motor skills of just moving your wrist. And I embraced that. And that was probably 5 years ago. So I embraced that conversation, and I've run with it since then. But I want to say one more thing about the bond of art therapy is when we go into hospitals and we're teaching this thing and we have 4 people around a table, and sometimes they all have their individual canvases, or maybe we're collaborating on a larger, 3 foot by 4 foot canvas. It's not about the art. It's not about the instruction. It's not about teaching somebody to paint or sketch or to draw. The interaction that happens, art therapy is like the bridge and it's the medium, right? People start and they get involved and they're painting. But then somebody else that's injured 2 weeks ago, and maybe it's a 18-year-old in a car accident versus a 65-year-old that was injured falling off of a roof and they've been in the hospital for 4 months, they start trading techniques of, oh, I learned to put my shoe on today, like this. Oh, you can go back to college and you can definitely attend class because I've done this. Or your relationship with your girlfriend or your wife can continue because we've experienced this. And it's that conversation that happens around the art therapy table. The arts at that point is it's an afterthought. It's the conversation between the people, and they start trading knowledge, and they share these ideals and their experiences. And it's really a beautiful thing. I've had people that their family members have come up after the therapy sessions and said they don't divulge that information to their doctor. They don't divulge that information to their therapist. They don't divulge that information to their wife, their parents, their whomever, but they have an art therapist in front of them, or maybe one of my volunteers that are just, helping me facilitate the workshop, and they open up their heart. I'm dealing with this. Because sometimes it's easier to tell a stranger those things, right? And it's a really beautiful medium to create, because what we're doing in those workshops is really just creating a space, a comfortable, safe space for these people. And it's a familiar space for the instructors and people who've been through that. And it's really interesting to have outpatients that are 6 years post-injury come in and share their experience with somebody that was injured 3 weeks ago. And if you boil it down, it's all about mentorship, right? And peer support. And that's what we facilitate.
I want to just say, David, that I want to build a whole show around your work. And
oh, man.
I want you to take a sailing, and I want all of us to have an art therapy class together with you.
Oh, I would love that. I would love to facilitate it.
If you need a deckhand, I know how to do my knots.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I grew up on a sailboat. So, yeah.
Good. So is everybody here based mainly up in New England, Massachusetts?
Yep.
We have about a third of the people in the Boston area.
Okay, great.
Andy, Tina, and Noam and I. And then the rest of the people are in Western Mass, in Amherst, Northampton, and Springfield.
Okay. Yeah, my grandparents lived in Wilbraham, just outside Springfield, for a long time. I mean, I spent my whole childhood going up to see them in the summer and Christmas time. But you all are welcome to participate in the adaptive sailing programs. We usually stop at Spalding, and we dock in Charlestown for typically 2 weeks every summer. That's one of our best, to me, one of my best ports of call. But we're also north and south of that. We do plenty of work in Newport, and then we always stop in Newburyport as well, a little bit north of Boston. But the folks at Spalding, and I mentioned this to Larry and Artemis yesterday about Oz. He's a huge, Spalding Hospital in general is just a huge supporter and proponent of what the Impossible Dream's doing, and they've really given us like a northern home during that trip, because there's no other place that we stay for 2 weeks during that whole trip, and we're gone for 4 months, so it's and if anybody is interested in sailing, from not just for the day but for periods of time, our captain and our first mate are both able-bodied, and then the adaptive crew members that have been doing it for years, we jump on for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, depending on the leg of the journey. So you can pick a place and be like, I'm going to do Baltimore to Boston this year, or I'm going to do Portland sailing south to New York City, and you can jump on board, and we we vet people and make sure they have certain skills, but it's also a great learning experience for people with mobility issues to be on the boat for an extended amount of time. And our first mate is also a PT, so if people are worried about transferring or bathroom care and showering like that, like there's definitely people that are aware and able to help with all sorts of things like that.
Giselle, I see you and your kids being part of a future sail.
I mean, I was supposed to take Mark to Spalding to get rehab after the drowning accident, but we chose to go home because I have 5 other children and we couldn't stay there. But we actually got to go on Artemis's lake with Mark and put him in the water for the first time. And I have pictures and videos of it, but I love what you're doing, and I think it's amazing. Especially Mark had a drowning accident, so for him to get back into water right after, and it was a couple of months after he was home, we went up to Artemis's house, we got on the canoe, and we put him in the water, and he was so happy with his life vest and waving at us, and it was just an experience. He was scared at first, but once he was there, he was happy. So what you're doing is amazing. It's just amazing. And Spalding is a great place. I love that place.
It's phenomenal facility, and I think your son's quite brave to be able to jump back into the water after that type of an experience. I mean, and that's the metaphor of what we do in terms of sharing that sailing experience. It's just we're inherently, our life is going to have challenges, right? Everybody, disability or not, visible disability or not. And it's critical thinking and problem solving and a different perspective. And it allows us to overcome these challenges, hurdles, situations, however you want to call it. So, and I think sailing's a great way to do it. But Spalding also has, they have adaptive kayaking. I mean, the fact that they're right there on the water allows them to be a super progressive rehabilitation center, because it's not just about, okay, I'm going to go to the therapy gym and lift weights today or do, they're ahead of the game up there. But the whole New England area is really lucky to have that type of rehab facility up there, because it's super unique.
We also have Shriners Hospital here in Springfield that would probably benefit for something like that. So I would love to connect you with someone there.
We always want to connect with, and there's people that are 20, 30, 50 miles inland, and it's just hard for us to get people to where we do the programming on the water. But if there's a way, if the hospital is willing to transport patients, whether it's a partnership with Spalding or we just meet on the dock somewhere, we can certainly facilitate that. We just can't sail to Springfield.
No, that's we have some sort of boat paddling. That's going on, and they're teaching kids how to do it through the riverfront.
Oh yeah.
So we do have some water around here, and there is some activity going on.
Yeah. There's also a really amazing adaptive rowing program on the Charles there in Boston.
There's a rolling program here by the riverfront for children in the inner cities. It's not geared to children with disabilities, but it's starting, and it's been here for about 2 years.
Well, I mean, they don't have to outfit every kayak or anything, but as long as they have one that or a couple that's able for people with disabilities to use, then that's a game changer. And I don't think a lot of people think that way. Shake a Leg in Miami, which is where Impossible Dream is based out of 8 months of the year, they have a whole fleet of adaptive sailing boats, and it's a game changer for people with disabilities in the whole Miami metro area. It's beautiful.
Beautiful. One of the inspirations of our work, Larry and I, was an article written in Wired magazine, written by one of the great thinkers of disability. And he talked about how people with disabilities are the avatars for the future, because people with disabilities have to use their cognition to interpret and make their lives work. And there's more dependence on technology. And we have a former board member, Keith Jones, who would only communicate with his toes hitting the Apple iPhone. Wow. And the phone was able to be programmed where he could step on it from his wheelchair and dial in a number and do the auto commands. And that phone was just as effective for him, if not more, because he knew the features. And so, Larry, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the avatar of the futures and what our belief is that disability is actually a higher form of intelligence. It's not like we're just trying to make it till we fake it until we make it. The people with disabilities have an advantage. In COVID, what we've seen is that everyone has to work at home now, and people with disabilities know how to work at home. And so that's really the conversation is, what are the advantages of being disabled in our society? And how do we create the financial incentives for that advantage to be favoritism to those people for their contribution, whether they're singers, artists, physical therapists, art therapists, it almost doesn't matter. Our vision is our disability not just makes us more human, not just connects us to the essence of life, to the mortality that we all face in some ways, but more importantly, the cognition of having to adapt yourself to your disability and the world makes you an avatar. And Larry, I'd love for you to, bring us home with that comment and also your view of this after 20 years of doing this work.
I'm tired. No, I think that goes back to inclusion at work. You have to show the abilities. And one of our board members, Donna, who's at GBH, is the mother of two developmentally disabled children. And at our last board meeting, she said, parents like myself have been fighting for years to convince corporations that they should hire people with disabilities, but they can work at home. And now everybody's working, not everybody, but millions of people are working at home, and suddenly it's all okay. And companies like Google are discovering, and in the interview with the gentleman from Intuit, he also said, they're out in, San Francisco area. If people drive an hour and a half in, an hour and a half out, I mean, there's really no reason for that. It's just the way it's been. And I do know that the hot disability for corporations has been neurodiversity, in part because there was a Harvard Business Review article on the advantages of hiring these people who can sit there for 12 or 13 hours and not be disturbed by the fact that they're so focused on something. And in a way, that's the first wave of what Artemis is talking about. So if these people have this ability, other people would have an ability. As David was saying, I mean, it's problem solving, it's critical thinking, as Artemis has always talked, and I can attest to that. When we go to Fenway Park, we have to get there early. You have to make sure, get onto the field before everybody else. I mean, you have to be much more conscious of what you're doing than the 35,000 people who just walk in and they don't even think about anything. So once it's recognized, and once our culture recognizes it, because being disabled or a disability or differently abled is just a cultural construct. It's just how we label somebody. So if we shift the label into avatar or extremely talented in this area, then it all changes. I discovered I was a straight A student except for foreign languages and also spelling. I could not absorb foreign languages. And years later, when I was at Harvard, I went to see this woman who was now in her 70s, but when she was about 15, was breaking the atomic bomb codes of the Germans in England. And she put me through a bunch of tests, and she said, Well, you could never learn languages the way they taught it to. You know, it's all like drill, and you're a slow processor. So that's why you're good at books and, you know, thinking of TV shows, because you put this and this and you put it all in a pattern, and you couldn't do it. If they dropped you in Paris, you'd be much better off. And so I went through years of sort of embarrassment. Well, how can I read all these history books and know all the dates without even thinking about it? And I can't learn 10 Latin words. I just can't, no matter what I do. So it was the structure of the school. It was the way it was perceived. It was the lack of knowledge of how to teach me correctly. So I think that's what we're learning. And as Artemis said, you know, the fear of disability blocks the sense of wonder that a child has. That, yo, this is kind of interesting. You're in a wheelchair, let's play. You know, they don't even think about it. And that's what businesses and corporations and our governments have to realize, that this is an enormous population of possibility, and not, oh, we have to give them welfare, we have to give them ramps, and oh, and I hear they're back again complaining about something else. And I think parents know it. They see the potential of their children despite the things that they have to deal with. And hopefully inclusion at work will be, you know, the first wedge in the door, and then we keep pushing the door till it's finally open, and people just, you know, welcome people with disability. And that's what the ADA law hasn't been able to do, you know, realistically. You know, the law's been there for 30 years, and the hiring levels have been abysmal. It's because they're not perceived as bringing a lot to it. And as Artemis says, you know, the people who use technology because they have to are in that way avatars for the rest of us. You know, we'll all be in driverless cars soon. So people with disabilities won't have all these problems of getting in and getting out, and how am I going to turn the wheel? Nobody will have to turn the wheel anymore. You just get in the back and say, Siri, take me to Taunton, and you'll get there. We'll all be getting there together. Anyways, well, I want to thank you all for your comments, and thank Artemis for hosting this, and everybody else who was involved. I learned a lot, and I remain optimistic that we can get behind the series and make it something important.
So say about the date, December 5th will be our
December 5th, then a week later, the 12th, the 19th.
The 5th, we will do a Zoom before the show with Larry, kind of a preview. Then we'll share a screen and watch the show together. And then we'll have a conversation after as a dialogue. And
we have some big names like Senator Tammy Duckworth, you know, who lost her legs in the Iraq War, and Tim Shriver, the CEO of Special Olympics, and David Renaud, who's a writer for The Good Doctor, who's a physician but also paralyzed, along with the executives from Intuit and Penn Mutual, and a Special Olympic champion. Actually, Chris Waddell will be interviewing him. Chris is a Paralympic champion, and this young man is a Special Olympic champion. They usually don't communicate with each other because they're in different athletic worlds. So in that way, that'll actually be a first. I'm looking forward to seeing what questions Chris asked and how they share their experience of how athletics has made their life much more rich and enjoyable. Anyways, I look forward to seeing you all again, and thank you for your help.
Thanks, Larry.
Anyone who wants to make a closing comment,
Larry.
thought, feeling? Noam, I'd love for you to end us with a song. But any other thoughts that people want to bring together before we say goodbye?
I'll do a quick comment. I think it's incredibly invaluable, the mission that you're doing right now with the Inclusion Works and focusing on people with disabilities in the workplace. It's everything that we spoke about, commuting, other challenges just to get to and work around in an office place, no matter what your role is an incredible challenge for people with limited mobility and other limitations in their life. And I think this is a great push. And I think this is one of the silver linings of the coronavirus is everybody e-learning, e-commuting, working from home. It just leveled the playing field. And I really think if we continue to push this agenda and raise awareness around it, it's gonna level the playing field.
Let me just add one thing about that. You can see how the able-bodied world, who now is confined into their houses, has to figure out when they go shopping, what they have to do when they get to the supermarket, how far away. They are having lots of problems. They are experiencing what people with disabilities have to do. And those people, in Artemis's terms, these are the people who actually mastered this a long time ago for them to get into the Stop and Shop and to get their groceries and get to the car. They do it all the time. Now you have to do this. And it's not easy, is it? The commonality is suddenly evident if people would just point it out. You can't even get to your car without, oh, now I have to spray the wheel. Now I got to wash my hands. Being that conscious and being that aware is really tough for able-bodied people. They can't do it very well because they never have to. They just walk around. The world is theirs. They don't have to figure out stairs. They don't have to figure out the elevator. They don't have to figure all this stuff out. Now they have to, and it's really hard. And so that's where the life experiences of people with disabilities, if we could get into conversations about this. And I heard tonight one of the doctors say, we're going to be in this probably for another 2 years because by the time the vaccine is given out, by the time its efficacy and all, it's going to take months. So this is not going away, and it's actually a big opportunity for people with disabilities to say, "Hey, want to listen to me? Let me tell you. Otherwise, you're going to collapse. You're not going to handle this. This is going to be months more of this stuff." Anyway, that's my.
I have a quote I want to leave everyone with. People are greater than their disabilities.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my mission in life to prove.
Sure.
So, David, I have many instruments over here, and which would you like to hear? You have inspired us tonight with your words. So you get to choose which instrument you'd like to hear. I have an A. It's like a flute from the reed. I have a frame drum, and I can play the guitar. But let me say, Larry, Sid, Artemis, Tina, Guinevra, and David. Thank you, Artemis, for hosting and convening. Thank you so much. I cannot express my gratitude.
Thank you for the music, Noam.
So much gratitude, so much love. There is, we can make a difference. We can change things.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
I mean, there's so many obstacles, but obstacles are just opportunities.
Agreed.
That's right.
Okay, that's it, man.
Everyone,
so this ends chapter 12.
Chapter 1 is finito.
Chapter 12 consecutive broadcast.
Days. Sydney, thank you.
Wow.
Give a high five to Sydney. Woo, Sydney.
You left.
We will be coming up with some new programming around film.
Sydney,
Work, your mothering. All of us as parents, we're gonna bring this home in a way where the dignity of being a human being is given to all of us, and that we as people with differences are included in our own dignity and our own rite of passage.
Giselle, Guinevra, Tina, Sid, Larry, David, Artemis.
And just a reminder that these episodes will be on YouTube and Facebook. I'm going to be starting a show on David next. No, I'm just kidding. David, we can talk about that later. But this might be the first of many episodes about inclusion at work. So I'm excited for that. I appreciate everyone being on tonight.
Thank you.
Inclusion at work involves everybody. We're all wanting to be included in our work and included in a way that allows our dignity to come through and our gifts to be accentuated.
What a better example than this
Yeah.
podcast.
Well said, Artemis.
Broadcast.
David, thank you for coming.
Bye.
David.
Mary,
Nice to meet you, David.
Thank everybody.
Nice to meet you, David.
Pleasure.
Tina, Guinevra, Giselle.
thank you, Guinevra, for your third Zoom meeting in one day.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.